Chiefs Kingdom, welcome back to another episode of the Chiefs Report. I'm your host, Jackson Durham, and today we're diving into a major off-season topic for the Kansas City Chiefs, the top 4 players who could be cut to create salary cap space. As we head deeper into the off-season, one thing is very clear: the Chiefs are one of the most cap-strapped teams in the entire NFL. That means the front office is going to have to make some difficult decisions to free up money and reshape this roster for the future. There are several ways to create cap space in the NFL: restructures, trades, extensions, but one of the quickest ways is simply releasing players whose contracts no longer make sense. Today, we're breaking down 4 names that could realistically be on the chopping block this offseason. But before we jump into the list, I need a quick favor from Chiefs Kingdom. If you want non-stop coverage of the Chiefs this offseason, from free agency news, trade rumors, draft breakdowns, and mock drafts, make sure you hit that subscribe button. This channel is your one-stop shop for everything related to the Kansas City Chiefs. Alright, let's get into the list. First up, and probably the most obvious candidate, is right tackle Jawaan Taylor. If the Chiefs move on from Taylor, they could save around $20 million in cap space. And honestly, that number alone makes the conversation pretty straightforward. Even if Taylor were playing at a high level, saving that much money would be extremely tempting for a team dealing with serious cap limitations. But the reality is that Taylor hasn't quite lived up to the expectations that came with his big contract when he joined Kansas City after his time with the Jacksonville Jaguars. At this point, it may simply be time for the Chiefs to move on. Kansas City also has some potential replacements already on the roster. There are younger players who could step in and compete for that right tackle spot next season, and the Chiefs could also address the position in the draft if needed. When you combine those options with the massive cap savings, it's hard to imagine Taylor still being on this roster in 2026. Now let's talk about the second player on this list, defensive end Mike Danna. If the Chiefs release Danna, they could save about $9 million in cap space. Danna has been a player that defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo has trusted over the years, but the production simply hasn't been there recently. In 2025, Danna finished the season with just 1 sack, 8 tackles, 9 pressures, and 3 quarterback hits. For a player expected to contribute to the pass rush, those numbers just aren't good enough. And when you look at the bigger picture, the Chiefs' pass rush struggled as a whole last season. Kansas City blitzed frequently just to generate pressure, and the front 4 still had difficulty getting to the quarterback. Moving on from Danna wouldn't necessarily make the pass rush worse, but it would help the team financially. Plus, there are younger players who could step into larger roles, and the Chiefs could also target pass rush help through free agency or the draft. Now, after those first 2 names, the decisions start to get a little more complicated. The third potential cut candidate is linebacker Drue Tranquill. Releasing Tranquill would free up about $6 million in cap space, but this one is much closer to a 50-50 decision. Tranquill has actually been a solid contributor for the Chiefs. He's a strong run defender and brings toughness to the middle of the defense. However, his biggest weakness is coverage. In the 2025 season, Tranquill allowed 95% of passes thrown into his coverage to be completed. That's a very difficult number to overlook, especially in today's NFL where linebackers are constantly tested by tight ends and running backs in the passing game. The bigger concern is depth. If the Chiefs move on from Tranquill, the linebacker room could become very thin very quickly, especially if other roster moves happen in free agency. So while the cap savings are tempting, Kansas City would need a clear plan to replace him before making that move. And finally, we have the biggest surprise name on this list, cornerback Kristian Fulton. Cutting Fulton would save about $5 million, which is why his name sometimes appears on cut candidate lists. But personally, I don't think it makes much sense for the Chiefs to move on from him right now. Fulton didn't play a huge role for much of the season, and there were times when fans wondered why he wasn't seeing the field more often. But late in the year, when injuries forced him into action, he showed that he can still contribute. He had one of his best performances against the Denver Broncos, helping keep the Chiefs competitive despite a roster dealing with injuries. Depth in the secondary is extremely important, and moving on from Fulton could leave the cornerback room dangerously thin. There's also another factor here, the future of star corner Trent McDuffie. Now